Hey guys, Brian, Mr. SF Studios. We're going to put this tensioner in my 97 3800. Pretty easy job, should take about an hour. Get a drain pan, put it underneath the car, right under your pet cock. Took the lid off the radiator. Now we're going to open the petcock and drain the radiator. There you go, draining the radiator. You take the petcock out. And you always want to put your coolant, your spent coolant in a container because animals will drink it and it's total poison. So you never want to leave it out anywhere. Put it in a sealed container when you're done and take it to a waste facility. Taking the valve off is super easy. You just put a 15mm on, and like you were going to loosen, you just push down and then pull the belt off. Alright? Pretty straightforward. Boop. Just like that. Before we go any further, we're going to disconnect the battery because we don't want any kind of electrical sparking or drama. Whenever you work with electrical stuff, you should disconnect your battery. Okay, this upper bolt on the alternator is 10mm. So you just take that one off. Alright. Okay, that lower one is a 13. So you need a 10 and a 13. The 13 goes here. There we go. Okay. There we go. So with your little vacuum valve switch thing out of the way, you can put a 13mm on this back alternator bolt and release it from the bracket. And just take that back bolt off. We got our 3 bolts. At this point, the alternator should be pretty much free. Yep, and so it is. So since it's basically a one-wire alternator aside from this deal, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect it just to get it out of the way. So you got to pop off this weather pack. Just take a little screwdriver under this tab, and then you can pop out your connector. And the hot lead's just another 13mm. Put it on there and bust it free. And this is why we disconnect the battery, because this thing is connected to the battery. So if it were to touch a metal surface, it would arc, and it would be really bad for both the battery and whatever it touched. It would arc weld. So always disconnect your battery when you're working on stuff. So at this point, the tensioner is just held on with 2 more bolts. 2 more 13mm, one under here and one under here. Alright, so you get those loose, and the whole tensioner will be pretty much free. The heater hose adapters are 8mm, these little guys. It's cool that GM added this because they must have known that someday you wouldn't be able to get the OEM hoses anymore. So they added these little things that you could hook this bracket to. Someday you won't even be able to make these work. You'll have to just come up with your own heater hose probably. Unless an aftermarket company comes up with a reproduction. Say it with me. Planned obsolescence. Okay, there we go. And this should just lift up and out. These are O-rings, they should twist up and out. If you can get new O-rings, this would be a great time to do that. Wow. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see? Oops, there goes some coolant. Looks like these O-rings look pretty good. But you could pry them out and take them into a auto parts store and see if they can get you new ones. There we go. Those are free. Okay, so our tensioner's held in with this and that. Let me just undo the 13mm. Keep track of which one's which because they do have differing lengths. It's pretty obvious. Look at the casting. See how these look. Usually I like to wire wheel my bolts and paint them black. Yeah, it looks alright. Looks like I put a little sealant. That one under here. So you just got to kind of leverage this part loose, pry it free. Be aware that this is holding tension here, and then the O-rings in there are also holding it in. Okay, so at this point, just give it a little, there it is. See, there's your old tensioner. Always compare your parts, make sure that they're externally the same, that you're going to line up and work. I think we're good. To pull this little elbow out from the front of the manifold. Might have to put something. Yeah, I put a little socket extension in there, and that helped me wiggle it out. So that's the elbow. If your kit didn't come with a new elbow, you can reuse your old elbow. Just pry these out and put some GM O-rings. See all the gunk in the bore there? You want to clean that out. Just take a little Scotch-Brite or scrubby sponge thing and just get in there and clean it out. Scrub it off. You don't want any gunk on your new O-ring. Good, and do the same at the front of the manifold. Clean it out. So I think our best bet here is to put the elbow in the manifold first, and then guide the tensioner onto the elbow. Just push your elbow in. Doesn't have to go in all the way because you want to be able to put it on your tensioner. And then I'll just put a little bit of coolant on this O-ring, and some on the other O-ring, and then we'll guide it in. I lower it in and hook it onto the elbow. You just kind of work with it till it seats this other one in the hole, and then gently push it in and on. I'm going to take these bolts and clean them up before I put them back in. I take a little wire wheel to them, and then put a little bit of anti-seize just so that the next time they'll come out, they won't be fused to the block. Okay, since these go into the head and possibly into the water jacket, it doesn't hurt to put a little RTV on the actual bolts just to seal them up so nothing oozes out or past the threads up and out the front of the bolt. There you go. I got my anti-seize on the bolt. I got my RTV on the bolt. We'll just hand start them. You never want to cross thread bolts. You always want to do them by hand before you start torquing on them with your tools. As you're tightening these, you want to switch back and forth. Tighten one a little bit, then move to the other one, tighten that one up, and move back and forth till they're snug. So I snug them down by hand, but then I got a torque wrench because the book says water outlet bolts 20. So that's 20 there, and they're clicking, so they're tight. We're good to go, I guess. So you just push your hoses back into the new tensioner, put your bolts on, lock them on. At this point, it's just a reverse of everything we just did. Putting your alternator on just the same way you took it out. So you can put your petcock back in, close it, and actually you're good to fill the radiator at this point, because if your heater hoses are in and your O-rings are all seated, you've got a closed system again. So when you get the alternator on, you would just put your belt on, but I'm replacing my belt because why would you put the same one back on? I mean, really, you put a new tensioner on, you should put on a new belt. So the AC Delco is a 6K 945. I think the 945 is the length, and the part number is 88932790. It's a good quality one, made in Mexico. If you get confused with the way the belt goes on a pulley, refer to your routing guide. All the cars have these right in front of the radiator. While you got the main hot lead to the alternator off, take a little metal polish and some steel wool and clean up that eyelet so you know you've got a good solid contact when you put it back together. So when your alternator is going back on to the new tensioner, there's a little reinforcing tab in here that will give you a little grief if this is slightly fatter than your old one. So you just kind of have to finagle it in there. You can put a little flathead in between and then hit it with a hammer and tap it down until it gets level with the bolt hole so you can put your mounting bolts in. So to get your alternator located, you can kind of wiggle it and put a small screwdriver through the hole till it reaches all the way into the tensioner shaft. That way it's located. Then you can start your lower bolt and then put your back bolt in. Okay, so you want to tighten up your hot lead with a 13 millimeter. You want to tighten up these bolts. 13 millimeter here, 13 millimeter there, and this one with a 10 millimeter. Okay, when you get all your alternator bolts tight, make sure you put your rubber cap over your hot lead on your bolt for the alternator. That's good. And then plug in your alternator weather pack here. Boop, like that. Put your little vacuum switch thing back on its stand here. Goes on this bracket like that. Okay, that's good. Now all you got to do is put a little tension on your tensioner. So the final thing to do is hook up the battery and start it up and check for leaks. If you have leaks, you got to take it all apart again and fiddle around with the O-rings. But with any luck, it wouldn't leak. It shouldn't leak. I mean, it went together, so the O-rings are in place. There's really no reason. Well, that's pretty much how you put the 3800 tensioner in. It's really not that hard. It takes about an hour and a half. I had my belt off a little bit, so I had to lower the tensioner and fudge it back onto all the grooves just right. You just want to make sure it tracks nice and straight on the water pump pulley, and that your grooves are lined up on the bottom crank. Yeah, it's good. Hopefully I won't lose any more coolant now. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Be well.